Welcome everybody, colleagues and visitors. My name's Rachel Baker. I'm the Director of the Yunus Centre for Social Business and Health, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our series of professorial lectures and to provide this introduction today. This series reflects the public role of universities, which for GCU, as the University for the Common Good, is about how our research and teaching contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, issued by the United Nations in 2015, running to 2030 and adopted by all countries. Today, the work described will be shown to address multiple SDGs, but particularly 1, 5 and 10, all of which relate to greater equality, SDG 3, which is about good health and well-being, and 11, sustainable cities and communities. Professorial lectures provide an opportunity for recently promoted professors to showcase their previous work and their future plans to colleagues, to other partners and stakeholders, and to friends and to family. Artur has with him today at home his partner Lee, and the lecture is also being joined by Artur's father, Stanisław, and sisters Isabella and Sylvia and their families. You are all very, very welcome. As are Artur's friends joining us from Poland, Scotland and across the UK. I would also like to thank Artur for taking the opportunity to present his professorial lecture this year online. And so to Artur himself. Artur Steiner originally studied for a Master Engineer degree at Technical University of Opole in southern Poland, completing his studies there in 2005, followed by a master's degree in management studies at Aberdeen University in 2006. He also completed his PhD at Aberdeen University, which was in social entrepreneurship in 2011. During his studies, Artur held a number of research assistantships and lectureships posts at the University of Highlands and Islands and at Lancaster University, and in 2011 moved to a research fellowship in the Rural Society Research Team and Rural Policy Centre at SRUC, Scotland's Rural College, before joining us at GCU as a lecturer in 2015 and becoming a reader here in 2017. Artur's primary research has attracted grants running into multi-millions of pounds from various prestigious research funders, including NIHR, National Institute for Health Research, the Wellcome Trust, the European Social Fund, and his knowledge exchange work has also attracted major awards from the British Council and Scottish Government, amongst others. His work's been published in several leading journals across disciplinary areas, such as small business, rural enterprise, local economy, rural and community development, geography, health, and social enterprise. In broad terms, these contributions have been about how community and socially oriented initiatives and enterprises contribute to health and well-being in various contexts. Artur's work has led to invitations to present and join the scientific committees of several national and international conferences. He's also on the editorial boards of Journal of Social Entrepreneurship and the Social Enterprise Journal. And all of this has culminated in Artur reaching the rank of professor here in GCU in 2019. Today, Artur will examine the implications of handing over power to local communities to shape policies and services. Please join me in welcoming to the floor to present his lecture on social entrepreneurship, service co-production and community empowerment, who wins, who loses, Professor Artur Steiner.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. And Rachel, thank you for this very kind introduction. Also, thank you all for joining me today to celebrate not only my recent promotion, but probably more importantly, the entire journey to it. I must say it is kind of strange to do a professorial lecture online, although over the last year, many of us have become used to online meetings. I'm also aware that we're kind of tired of looking at our laptops and computer screens. Indeed, it would be really nice to see you face to face, to speak to you personally, and to have a glass of wine after this lecture. But unfortunately, it's impossible to do it this year or at the moment. And therefore, I'm even more thankful that you managed to join me, especially now when there's such a nice, beautiful day outside. So thank you for that. I prepared a PowerPoint presentation that I would like to share with you. I hope that the technology won't fail us today. So let me try to upload the presentation. I'm going to stop my video for a moment and I'm going to upload the presentation. I hope you can see the presentation now. I can see a confirmation, so that's brilliant. So let me begin. So those of you who work in academia know very well that although rewarding, academic work is also demanding. Some would say it's not a job, it is a way of life. We don't work Monday, Friday, 9 till 5, we work 24/7. Very often I wake up in the middle of the night with some genius research and paper ideas. Unfortunately, I don't write this down straight away, so my most brilliant thoughts are often lost. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that academic work is our passion, but this means that sometimes we find ourselves in what I call a treadmill situation, juggling numerous tasks with conducting research, writing papers, teaching, developing new research proposals, and so on. And sometimes because of all these tasks, we don't really have time to stop and think who we really are academically. So this professorial lecture has given me an opportunity, or perhaps forced me to stop for a minute and think about my own achievements and career path. And all of a sudden I realized I've got a problem here. And the problem is that over the course of many years, we as academics investigate so many different things. We explore new territory of knowledge, expand on our interest, evolve our thinking, continue our learning about life and what surrounds us. And at some point, probably what is happening in our head is similar to the slide that you can see on the screen right now. So there is a lot of messiness out there and we're trying to find understanding around it. And due to this complexity, it is challenging to capture everything associated with this rich academic career path in a short presentation. So when I was asked to prepare my professorial lecture, I had to spend quite a lot of time thinking about the theme of my speech, and I came up with this title here: Social Entrepreneurship, Service Co-Production, and Community Empowerment. Who wins, who loses? Indeed, I believe it is important to explore this question because over the last 20 years, aspects of social entrepreneurship, service co-production, and community empowerment have been eagerly discussed by academics, policymakers, and practitioners. And during this lecture, I'll explain how I decided upon the title, and based on my research, I'll try to answer this question. But firstly, and with reference to my professorial journey, I'd like to move back in time, because where I am today is an outcome of many different events, sometimes unintentional, and the results of input from many different people. And Rachel briefly referred to that already. I must admit that as a child, I never dreamt of becoming a professor. Unlike other children who want to become firemen, policemen, or doctors, I wanted to work in a petrol station. I know it seems like a strange career choice, and thankfully it didn't come to fruition. As a teenager, I decided to do a master's degree in marketing and management at Opole University of Technology in Poland. At the same time, my sister Isabella encouraged me to apply for the EU-funded Students Exchange Erasmus program. I was successful and traveled a long journey by coach to the UK to study with the intention of staying for 1 year only. That year, however, influenced my entire life. Falling in love with Scotland and the UK, and after finishing my Students Exchange course, I applied to do another degree in business studies at the University of Aberdeen. And again, fate played her hand, and before finishing this degree, I was encouraged to apply for a PhD. After finishing 2 degrees, I felt that it was time for me to do and get a proper job. I also felt that I wanted to differentiate myself from my 2 older sisters, Sylvia and Isabella, one of whom had completed her PhD and other studying for her PhD. Still encouraged by my dad and my sisters, I applied for my PhD. I successfully went through the interview process and I started working at the University of the Highlands and Islands with 2 great supervisors, Professor Jane Farmer and Professor Sarah Jack. The PhD was about development of social enterprises and social entrepreneurship. It was a great theme for me to investigate, as up until that point, my studies were focused on commercial entrepreneurship. In a way, I wasn't sure how bringing social values to the concept of entrepreneurship would really work. As you probably know, social enterprises use tools associated with commercial entrepreneurship to tackle in a sustainable and innovative way social and economic challenges faced by communities and individuals. So this became part of my academic investigation. Focusing and being based in the Scottish Highlands, one of the most sparsely populated rural areas in Europe, my study also considered contextual factors of rurality, for example, how to provide services in rural communities. While conducting my PhD, Jane, my PhD supervisor, invited me to join and work with her on an EU-funded project looking at social entrepreneurship as a potential solution to the challenges associated with aging population and diminishing rural services. This was my first experience of academic teamwork, and I quickly realized that I had a passion for this. Sarah, my second supervisor, who was based at Lancaster University, also invited me to work on some of her projects. On one occasion, Sarah invited me to join her in interviewing entrepreneurs from the Lake District. And I remember Sarah picking me up in a Porsche, and at that point, I quickly realized that academic life was for me. I thought to myself, well, I'm in a great car, in a beautiful part of the world, speaking to successful and inspiring people, and I get paid for it. So what else could I want from life? But being more serious, these experiences were essential in developing me as an academic. During my PhD, I joined the Highlands and Islands Social Enterprise Zone, an organization supporting development of social enterprises. Through my work with practitioners, I was better able to understand and influence social enterprise practice. After finishing my PhD, I started working at SRUC with Professor Sarah Skerrott in a small but very vibrant team. Sarah gave me the opportunity to work as the module lead on the Scottish Government's Strategic Rural Research Programme, a program which directly informed policymakers about the effectiveness of interventions aiming to develop empowered, strong and resilient rural communities. As part of this program, we developed a community resilience model subsequently recognized by DEFRA as being a significant contribution in development of measurements for the concept of resilience. As such, during my time at SRUC, I became accustomed to working with policymakers in the policy domain. Interestingly, while working at SRUC, I was invited to speak at a Partnership Against Poverty Summit in the Philippines to talk about poverty alleviation. Here, I met Professor Mohammad Yunus. And indeed, it never crossed my mind that one day I would work in a research center bearing his name. Looking back, I see that friends and colleagues have shaped my career. One day, Mike Woolvin, a friend from the SRUC team, sent me a job description for a role at the Yunus Centre here at Glasgow Caledonian University. I clearly remember Mike describing how he felt that the job spec had been written for me. And indeed, I looked at it, and I also felt that the job had my name all over it. So without any further thought, I successfully applied for it and I joined GCU family. And since then, I've worked with many amazing people on many amazing projects, including, for example, 2 common health projects, including Growth at the Edge and Focus 50+. As a principal investigator, I managed to secure several grants, and I have worked on 2 cool music projects. I was fortunate enough to win a grant to assess the Community Empowerment Act for the Scottish Government. I currently work on the Sustainable Community Shed project. More recently, I have started working on new projects, including optimizing the rules of online communities in rural resilience with Australian team, training for veterans project, and we are about to start a new, very exciting project, a national project, large-scale project run by Professor Rachel Baker, on how community-led organizations impact on the health and well-being of people living in deprived areas. So obviously there is a lot of research going on, and taking into consideration all these projects, there is also a rich body of new and emerging evidence and new knowledge. And when preparing for this professorial lecture, rather than looking at one specific project, I reflected on each of them, but from a big picture perspective. I began wondering, what does it all mean? Across all this project, I identified some common threads. This included social entrepreneurship, and as suggested by Muhammad Yunus, social entrepreneurship challenges the concept of charity. It is about doing things with people rather than to people. It is about finding sustainable, entrepreneurial, and long-lasting solutions to persistent and wicked problems. The second domain, service co-production. Service co-production helps to challenge inflexible top-down structures. Service co-production increases efficiency by creating services that people want, support, and co-construct. And the third domain, community empowerment, which brings a higher level of democracy, helping to hear people's voices and execute personal choice. And it is about engagement and participation. What is important to notice is that those 3 domains are not separate. They overlap, they interact with one with another, they influence one another. And also, what is clear from the numerous studies I've been involved with is the notion that these 3 concepts are used to tackle demographic, health, social, and economic challenges that we as a society face. In other words, they are used to tackle disadvantage, inequality, and vulnerability. So let's talk about those 3 domains one at a time. Let me start with the first domain, disadvantage. We may be disadvantaged due to geographical conditions of the place we live in. For example, rurality is characterized by sparsely populated areas with limited or lack of services. Those services which exist often have a high running cost, a lack of economy of scale, a lack of employment opportunities and underemployment, limited access to education, out-migration of young people, and internal conflicts with rural communities that may jeopardize community development. So there is quite a lot of issues going on there. And some of these aspects were unpacked through, for example, the Capacity for Change program, during which we focus on working with hard-to-reach rural communities in an effort to develop their social and economic resilience. In collaboration with leaders in Dumfries and Galloway, we identified that some communities never apply for community development funds. On the other hand, those vibrant and resourceful communities often take advantage of existing support structures to further develop places where they live. Indeed, this leads to inequalities, with strong communities getting stronger and weak communities lacking resources to overcome their challenges. So through Capacity for Change, we try to build, as the name of the program indicates, capacity within some deprived communities. Considering rurality, in another project called Growth at the Edge at the Yunus Centre, we look at the impact of rural social enterprises on health and well-being. The project identified that rural social enterprises can lead to reduced social isolation and loneliness. This, amongst other health and well-being outcomes. Now, working in collaboration with my Australian colleagues from Swinburne University, We investigate the role of online communities in building community resilience and health. As such, we go beyond geographical boundaries, showing how rural and urban communities can work together and draw on and share their resources and community assets. So let's move to another domain now, inequalities. So we may experience inequalities not because of a geographical context, but because of socio-economic circumstances that we're in. For example, disadvantaged, hard to reach young people who were born in a certain environment, exposed to social problems that are beyond their control, but that shape their behaviors and how they interact with other people around them. For example, in our Cool Music project, run in collaboration with a social enterprise called Heavy Sound, we worked with disadvantaged young people with adverse childhood experiences. Some of these children experienced domestic abuse, neglect, poor school attendance records, behavioral problems. Some were involved in violence and drugs. What we're forgetting about is that these children are frequently a product of their environment. At the same time, in many cases, traditional large-scale public sector interventions don't work when it comes to addressing challenges faced by this group of young, hard-to-reach people. To provide more efficient services, Heavy Sound, a social enterprise that we work with, use music as an engagement tool to build relationship with young people, and then they support them on the one-to-one basis. So in this project, we evidence positive impacts of the intervention on the young people and managed to secure more funding to scale it up and support more people. In our new project that only started at the beginning of this year, we work with another social enterprise called Scotland's Bravest Manufacturing Company. This to support veterans, again, a group of society that, due to professional circumstances, can be very vulnerable. In this piece of work, we as academics assess the impact of training and employment program. If proven to be successful, this approach can be used in other parts of the country to support other vulnerable veterans. So far, I have highlighted that we can be disadvantaged because of a geographical location or due to the socio-economic environment that we're exposed to. But we may experience challenges simply because of who we are, because of our background, gender, sexual orientation, or age. These factors too can lead to inequalities or vulnerabilities. Some of this were explored in projects that I have been working on. So for example, in the Older People for Older People, or For All project, we wanted to challenge the negative perception of older people as passive recipients of service users and demonstrate older people as a resource within our communities and those who can set up and run social enterprises to co-produce health and health-related services. Many of the participating communities managed to create sustainable and viable solutions to local challenges. Some of these community enterprises exist even now and thrive after so many years after our intervention. In another project, Focus 50+ in the Yunus Centre, we look at aspects of service delivery produced by and for older citizens. And we explored pathways to health and well-being, deriving from engagement with social enterprises. Currently, I'm also a principal investigator on a project that supports the sustainability of men's sheds, which are gender-specific community-based organizations created by and run for men. Again, previous studies have shown men to be more likely to engage in risky behaviors, such as excessive drinking, unhealthy diet, smoking. And all of this can lead to poor health outcomes. So compared to women, men are also less likely to participate in health improvement initiatives or access primary healthcare services. Here we can say that gender influences our life expectancy, with men living shorter lives than women. Findings from our study show that menshets can effectively contribute to improved health and well-being of participating men. Menshets can increase users' mobility, their ability to overcome physical illness. They assist in improving participants' diet and decreasing alcohol use. They also have positive impacts on mental health of menshets users. These are only selected and some examples of the projects I've been working on. But before I move on, I would like to just highlight two key matters. So firstly, in my short description of the projects, you could see that all the initiatives have referred to and heavily relied on participation and engagement of communities and individuals within communities. It is about bottom-up community development with people doing things for themselves. So are communities alone in their attempt to create a better quality of life for people? So in reference to this question, it is clear that top-down interventions are important in supporting social entrepreneurship, co-production, and community empowerment. Here I would like to stress that several regional, national, and international funders enable us to run and support all these community projects. Some of the funders, for example, include Community Fund, Leaders, Scottish Government, European Social Fund, MRC, NIHR, Horses in Mind, and many other funders. When running our projects, we collaborated with many public sector stakeholders, including local authorities or NHS staff. Moreover, there are a lot of policy documents that relate to these matters. But today I would like to refer to a specific policy introduced in Scotland called Community Empowerment Act. I had the privilege to act as a principal investigator on the evaluation of two components of this act, including participation request and asset transfer request. This work was conducted for the Scottish Government due to its statutory duty to review the impact of this legislation. And during this evaluation, we work closely with community empowerment team. Our evaluation showed that in general, the legislation gives new rights to communities and it can help to reduce inequalities in Scotland. The results of this evaluation are currently being discussed by our Scottish Government colleagues to inform future policies in this area. And here on the slide, you can see two reports that we publish with the Scottish Government on their website. So I refer to two kind of questions. So there is also the second question that appears here. As already mentioned, social entrepreneurship, service co-production, and community empowerment, they all are used as tools that aim to address aspects of disadvantage, inequality, and vulnerability. However, considering the scale and the nature of the challenges to be addressed, can social entrepreneurship, service co-production, and community empowerment be an effective solution? So in reference to this question, it is clear that social entrepreneurship, co-production, and community empowerment can bring a number of positive outcomes addressing some of the wicked problems. They can help to engage those who are hard to reach. They can help to co-produce services in places where services are lacking. They can help to increase service efficiency when services are inefficient. In some cases, we've seen that the state services are being replaced with community-run services. Indeed, we can see that bottom-up as well as top-down interventions assist to practice social entrepreneurship, co-production, and can lead to community empowerment. But is it all so rosy? Do we all win when we embrace social entrepreneurship, co-production, and community empowerment? Or maybe I should ask, who wins, who loses? Indeed, these are important questions to ask because sometimes when we're trying to fix one problem, we can create another one. So rather than taking an idealistic and utopian view of social entrepreneurship, service co-production, and community empowerment, it is important to remain critical. And this is something which academics are good at. Although we see several benefits associated with social entrepreneurship, service co-production, and community empowerment, our findings point to a number of challenges that can't be really simply ignored. Without referring to specific projects, I'd like to highlight some of those challenges, and by doing so, I will let you decide who wins and who loses from embracing social entrepreneurship, service co-production, and community empowerment. So, although supported by grants and subsidies, we observe that many social and community enterprises are not financially sustainable. Indeed, many of these community initiatives tackle massive challenges that public sector finds difficult to tackle. As such, despite socially entrepreneurial solutions, can we always expect financial sustainability from these ventures? Lack of financial sustainability leads to what I call here a domino effect, as it can lead to negative impacts on staff who deliver or run specific initiatives. This includes, for example, short-term contracts and lack of job security, pressure on those delivering the projects and who are attached emotionally to supporting service users, but the project funder imposes time limitations on the project funding. Indeed, we identify negative impacts on mental health and well-being of social community workers. Another big question is, what happens to the service users when a community organization fails to deliver? Or when the externally funded projects come to an end? Lack of continuity in the service provision might have negative consequences on the service users. Further, there is a perception that communities are always united, coherent, and supportive. But we came across of communities characterized by conflict and disagreement. In this kind of settings, taking advantage of social entrepreneurship, service co-production, and community empowerment is highly challenging or even impossible. In some of the communities that I work with, despite efforts of numerous stakeholders and financial investments from the public sector, many community development projects failed. Who loses then? A community who's supposed to benefit from the service, or the state that invested money in a specific initiative that wasn't supported by the community? There are also some issues associated with power struggles at the different levels, including, for example, community level. Some of the questions that appear here are who organizes community services and who are the services for? Who is in charge of the services and who decides how to take them forward? These issues matter at a community level and can lead to conflict. At the same time, challenges can appear at the higher level, with some public organizations not willing to share or give up elements of power that they have traditionally held. In some cases, national empowerment policies might not be adequately followed at the local level. Importantly, however, giving up powers by public bodies and the transfer of rights to service co-producers comes with a level of new responsibilities that community members need to accept. Those responsibilities are not always expected by community members. In other words, community empowerment and service co-production come with certain benefits, but also with responsibilities. Those who want to practice social entrepreneurship and engage with service co-production need to better understand what they're signing into. Finally, some communities don't want to co-produce services. They don't want to come up with socially entrepreneurial solutions, and they don't need to feel to be empowered. Once again, who loses in this case? And what do we do with those don't communities? So what is the answer to this question here? Well, indeed, it is a complex issue and a matter that is far from being straightforward. But that's probably a good thing, as my boss, Professor Simon Teasdale, would say, without this complexity, we academics wouldn't have a job. But being more serious, as you can see, over the course of many years, I have had a privilege to work with hundreds, if not thousands, of project participants, as well as project stakeholders and funders. I know that many of the projects I have been involved with have brought positive change to many participants. And that's the testimony of mine and my colleagues' work. Anyway, my concluding thought is that considering who wins and who loses might not necessarily be the right thing to do, because we're not dealing with a zero-sum game. Ideally, we would like to see evidence when there's a win-win situation, where service users, service providers, community members, and public servants gain mutual benefits from social entrepreneurship, service co-production, and community empowerment. And this is the reason why we, academics, conduct our work, to identify what works for who and in what circumstances, and to design, in collaboration with relevant stakeholders, better ways of working. And with this concluding thought, I will continue my career, my work, and my passion. But before I finish, I must say that I wouldn't have been able to achieve so much without the support of my family, my friends, my partner, and my colleagues. So whilst some motivated me, telling me kind of, you can do it, others guided and provided inspiration for me to progress my career. And I'd like to thank each of you for being there for me. And I know that I have mentioned few names during my presentations, and this slide shows some of my friends that have been there for me during my journey to professorship. But if you don't appear on this slide, don't worry. It's only because there wasn't enough space to squeeze more pictures. So thank you all. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your support. Thank you. I'll stop sharing now the presentation.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. I would like to just ask you a question, if I may. What has been your most defining moment in your career, your research career so far?
That's a big question. I think I never knew that actually academic career could be so exciting. Very often people think that academics live in a kind of artificial bubble, and I think what I discovered in the last 10-15 years is actually that our work matters, that our work can influence practice, our work can influence policy, and I think this is the most exciting part of an academic life for me. Yeah.
Thank you. As we mentioned earlier, there is an opportunity for you all to ask Artur a question. If you're wanting to ask directly, you can just pop your hand up just now within the raise hand function. Or if you're a wee bit on the shy side, you can just quickly type a message over to the chat and I can read it out. I don't know, Rachel, was there anything you would like to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Lynn, and thank you, Artur. I have got a question. Despite the fact I'm very familiar with your work and your research, it was great to hear it presented in that way. When you were talking about how social entrepreneurship and co-production and community empowerment might be solutions to larger scale problems, I wondered to what extent those three things have changed the conversation. Can you say something a bit more about whether or not social entrepreneurship and community empowerment is changing the discourse or the ideas that are floating around?
Yeah, so obviously, we talk about certain wicked problems that affect the entire planet, and we think straight away about kind of large-scale solution. And when we think about large-scale solutions, straight away we're thinking about big organizations, we're thinking about governments, and that's absolutely fine. But I'm not saying that it has to be either or. I think that actually social entrepreneurship should kind of fill in certain gaps where neither public sector or private sector are efficient. So I gave, for example, this example of young people who somehow, not because of their own reasons, ended up in a very unfortunate position, and they are somehow forgotten. There are public top-down initiatives trying to address certain social challenges, but we can see that very often those interventions don't work, and you have to have probably small scale bottom-up community organizations like the one that I work with, Heavy Sound, and they're doing amazing job with when it comes to supporting young people. Can you scale it up, and to what extent can you scale it up? That's a big question. During the course of probably 2-3 years, the project started delivering services to more and more people. But then also there is a danger that you lose, I think, this kind of personal touch when you try to make things bigger. So bigger doesn't mean necessarily better. But if you think about lots of different community organizations, social enterprises that co-produce services, I believe that they can, those small steps in high numbers, they can change the reality and address wicked problems.
Got a question in from Fraser. How do we build resilience among our third sector workers implementing all of this? You mentioned there are problems with burnout and mental health.
Yes, interestingly, you were about to write a paper about that, but what we discover is that, you know, one of the key challenges that we face is that very often social community workers, they get short-term contracts. Very often that doesn't enable them kind of long-term job security. Very often social community workers, they do their work because of their passion, because what they believe in, and I think that should be recognized, and that's not recognized. And I understand public spending cuts, financial challenges, but after all, we have to also recognize that those organizations play a very important function. So it is important to think about kind of financial support for those organizations, training when it comes to entrepreneurial solutions, so the organizations can become sustainable on their own when they can. But as I said before, there is this element that we're expecting to do a massive job, something that cannot be tackled by the private sector, something that is not necessarily targeted efficiently by the state. And we're expecting first sector organizations to do this job without any support. And I don't think we can have it all. So I think an injection of financial support, it is only the starting point that can, for example, provide long-term job security, and that can lead probably to better health and well-being outcomes and resilience of the third sector workers.
Thank you. We have another question in from Linda. Are there key interventions or conditions that would encourage the development of our social entrepreneurship?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Are there key interventions or conditions that would encourage the development of social entrepreneurship?
I mean, there is obviously a number of interventions, and we can start from policy interventions in terms of, for example, in Scotland, the 10-year social enterprise strategy kind of plan and local networks supporting social enterprises. So we've got lobbying bodies, we've got policies that relate to social enterprises, we've got financial support through First Port and other organizations. We've got organizations like High Finance Enterprise or other smaller organizations, and I think this is very important that is part of the social enterprise ecosystem. And also over time, I remember when I started studying social enterprise, very few people would know what a social enterprise is. So we were at the very early stages of the development of social enterprises in the UK. And look what happened in the last 20 years. You know, there is a proper movement, and social enterprises have a voice. You can see policy documents, you can see funding opportunities supporting social enterprises. It is probably about thinking about more systematic support that can provide the kind of real support for the organizations that really need this support.
Okay, thank you. There's been no more questions put forward. I don't know if, oh, hang on, just as I said that, one popped in. Okay. So a question from Nadine. Thank you, Artur, for a wonderful presentation. You mentioned the significance of grassroots community organisations in mobilising social entrepreneurship, yet considering SE remains not exclusive to any sector and private sector is increasingly venturing into delivery social aims, do you see any risk of the concept being co-opted by the private sector?
I mean, there is always a danger. I mean, one of the challenges associated with the whole concept of social enterprise is that there's so many different definitions of social enterprises. There are charitable organizations that have enterprising activities, and there are probably kind of local community enterprises, and then you've got commercial enterprises that kind of try to use a label of a social enterprise, to gain certain benefits associated with being a social enterprise. So there is always a danger of that movement, but at the same time, I think we can see evidence of a growing pressure of us as customers and service users that we expect from service providers to act ethically, to think about social and environmental aspects. And I think if this is something that we can spread in our communities amongst us as customers and put pressure on service producers and those who produce products and produce products, I think we can make a change. Yeah.
Thank you. That's all the questions. So I'll just pass back over to Professor Rachel Baker. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. There was one other that Bobby and Lauren were encouraging you to answer, Artur, so I'll ask you that one before making some concluding remarks, if that's okay. And it's really about what you want to do next in your research. So what's the future for social entrepreneurship, community empowerment and co-production research? And to that's been added, how do you perceive the role of corporate partners in supporting local activities? So there's a couple of late questions in there. You can choose from those.
Right. Well, that's a big question. What do I want to do next? I think academic work never finishes. I think there's quite a lot of things that we always want to investigate. I mentioned a few new projects, exciting projects that we're involved in. Some of them they're about to start in the next few months. Some of them they started only a few months ago. And I think I want to dedicate and spend time on exploring those. I think at some point, as I mentioned at the beginning of this lecture, I think it was nice to have this opportunity to think about all the projects that I've been involved in, kind of zoom out and look at my academic career. I think there's so many other things that I want to explore, but I think the important thing is to take one thing at a time. And you never know what the future brings, to be honest.
Thanks, Artur. Thanks for a fantastic lecture. I've learned things about you that I didn't know, not least that you've probably got the highest average count of PhDs per family of any family I know. I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming in such numbers. It's great that we've been able to welcome you online, and some people who may not have got here today have been able to join us. So there are some advantages to this online delivery. But one of the disadvantages is that we would usually now be ushering you into a room to enjoy wine and to continue this conversation with nibbles and so on. And I'm really sad that we're not doing that now. I think we'll have to find space for that when we're all back in amongst each other again. What I would say is I encourage you to follow up with Artur or to follow up with the Yunus Centre if you'd like to. In place of that wine and chat, we'll have to find other routes. Just to conclude, I think what you've demonstrated in your lecture today, Artur, is not just your academic accomplishments in terms of your publications and your grip of your subject, but also the impact that your research has and its relevance more widely to policymakers and to the communities and organisations that you've worked so passionately with. So congratulations again, Professor Artur Steiner.
Thank you so much. And thank you for joining in such high numbers. I really appreciate that.